should you be saying no to your pastor when he has an idea?
Right.
And I think you landed on like, it's that yes, but conversation. It's like, it's not to say, no, we can't do that. Like, you're right. It's 2025. And if they want a car flown from the ceiling, there's a way to do that. Hey everyone, welcome to the Gear Follows Vision podcast. My name is Deron, and we're here to talk about how your church's audio, video, and lighting systems should serve your church's ministry and not the other way around. So today we've got Tyler Kaneshiro here with us in the house, and we're going to unpack this vision word and just more of the substance behind it. But before that, man, would you just give us a little bit about your ministry background and some of your production experience?
Yeah. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Southern California, and I was at a church of about 600 or so.
Yeah.
So smaller church. I know is that technically a mega church?
I think it's above 1,000's mega, but that's a large church.
Yeah, large church. But yeah, it was about, maybe 500 people. And kind of how I got into production and ministry was the worship pastor at that church. He was, again, staff of maybe 5 people. And he had some production experience, like mixing. He was did a lot of like independent contracting stuff and had some production experience, but and it ended up being the worship pastor at this church. And he just invited me into what he was already doing. So like, and the church, it was about a half a mile from my high school. So it kind of became like, if I wasn't at school or in practice or whatever, that's kind of where I was at, because it was right down the street. And so ended up kind of just hanging at the church. I call myself the church rat kind of person. Like I was always just hanging out. And he was like, hey, can you help me do this thing? Any projects that were having, set design change, it was installing something or whatever. And that honestly was, for me, like when I look back, I'm like, that was discipleship. Like that was, sure, I was helping him get tasks done. I was helping him whatever. But he was just like inviting me into his life. Like
amazing. It
was, hey, I need to get my brakes done. You want to come with me? Yeah. And along the way, we're talking about whatever comes up in life. And so, awesome. And then, so he kind of invited me to that, kind of taught me some basic like fundamentals of audio and lighting, whatever he kind of knew. And I just kind of got plugged in and like kept diving in and kept showing up. And then eventually came on staff there for a couple of years. And then my wife and I, we moved to Northern California. I went to Bayside Church, and we were there for 6, almost 7 years. And then about 3 years ago, moved out here to Colorado, joined the team at Flatirons. And it's been awesome. So for the last 3 years of overseeing our production team, and then just recently stepped into a role overseeing both our worship and production teams together. And so excited to be here and talk about vision and all the things. Yeah. And I think for sure in all the production roles, but as you're stepping into this greater expanded role, right, where you're overseeing worship and production, this vision word gets thrown around a lot. Like what's our vision for this event? What's our vision for the church? What's our vision for worship? And sometimes I think we can overuse that word vision. Yeah. We have it plastered all over this podcast, but we need to unpack, what do we mean by that? And so what have you seen? Like when you're stepping into these conversations with your lead pastor or your worship person, like, man, how do they use the word vision, and where is it maybe wrongly applied? Sure. Yeah. I think I've always struggled a little bit with the words vision and mission. Cause I think they get used interchangeably sometimes. And I don't know that I actually know what is the difference. I've always kind of approached it like vision's maybe things could look like, what they could be. Mission maybe is how we accomplish that. Maybe that's the way to think about it. But regardless, I think you're right. Like, I think we use the word vision for a lot. We're like, we use it to mean a few different things or 1,000 different things. Like when we're asking, what's the vision for this event? It's like, well, there's the overarching answer that's usually like, well, we want people to meet Jesus or dive deeper in their faith or something like that. Yeah. Which you could say about anything that a church does, like, and is the right response. Like that is the vision. Yep. But I think when we sometimes say, what's the vision for this thing? What we're really trying to get at is, what do you want this to look like? Or what's some outcomes you're actually looking to like see happen.
Yeah.
And so I think like it's a good and worthy and great conversation to have of what is vision. But I think the language around like we get lost in it. We get lost in this like ethereal kind of like, this is the again, it comes back to, we want people to meet Jesus. That's great. We could do that a million different ways. And so I just think, overall vision, sometimes I get a little like, we don't need to talk about vision, because the vision, so it's a little, I guess this is going against what your Gear Follows Vision, but
let's go.
But I think it's like, hey, vision hasn't changed since day one of this church being planted, or this organization started.
Yeah.
Because somebody had a vision.
Right.
Likely that vision has not changed. So we don't really need to ask what's our vision necessarily. The question really is, how do we translate this into what this event, this project, this initiative, like, so I think, again, it's not that we need to ignore vision. I think we should keep that in front of us, but I think that's not the question that we're typically asking.
Yeah, so, no, that's good. I think where I've seen this go awry as well is when the production folks is just like, tell me what to do. Right. Not like they might ask the vision question of like, man, what's the vision for the event? But they're really saying like, do you want a band for this event? Right. Which is not actually driving towards the vision. Right. And I do think you're right. Like a lot of times the vision of the church rarely is changing. And yet like how it translates down into implementation is where we get stuck. Right. And so, but I think there are legit moments where like the production person isn't following the vision of the church. Totally. Right? Yeah. And so they do need to start there. Yeah. We've started to unpack a little bit here in our organization of like, there is the vision for the organization, there is the strategy, and there's the implementation. Sure. And those are actually three different layers of clarity on how we're driving for an initiative or an outcome. Yeah. And I think getting into that level of like, okay, so the vision of the church is X, Y, or Z. Is important maybe at a project level, but when you're in the day-to-day like you are at Flatirons, right, you don't necessarily need the like, let's revisit the vision of what Flatirons is doing, because you're right, it has not changed since Jim got there however long ago. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I'd love to pivot at that a bit. Like, let's talk about, okay, so the vision of the church isn't changing, but what happens, like how does someone who maybe doesn't understand maybe not the vision of the church, but the strategy from their pastor, like how would you advise them to start going about unpacking that? Yeah, it probably depends a little bit on like, are we talking about a project or an event or something? But I think at least at the base of it, baseline foundation to me is really like understanding your pastor. And I think we have to become, as people who are supporting our leaders, supporting our pastors, we have to become like students, not only students of them, but we have to figure out how to ask questions that they aren't necessarily going to just give us the answers to. So like, for in any situation or in any church that I've been in, I feel like I've had to figure out like, what are there's like 3 to 5 things that really matter to them. And they might be really, really small. Like, hey, I'd like, when I walk in the green room, at least the lights, it feels like somebody was here and there's a service order, that I can see, like whatever, something small like that. Yeah. So like, hey, anytime I walk out on stage, I want it to be a hot crowd. Like I want to walk out to a big moment. They probably wouldn't say that. But if you have to like, you do have to kind of do some work to go, hey, whenever they ask, like they're always asking us to end big. Yeah. I should clock that and go, oh, they want to, that's how they want to come out to on stage. Or like, so I think there's a few different things that we have to understand about them, and they're not necessarily going to offer that up. And they probably, again, wouldn't say things like that. They wouldn't come out and go, here's my list of like things that really matter to me. Maybe they do on here's
like
my writer for the worship experience.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's not like we could go down a whole rabbit trail of the whatever abusive honor culture, that whole stuff. But that's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about like, what are the things that they just care about, just as like people. And if we can just do those things, I think we save ourselves a lot of heartache on like, because then we're not trying to fight this like what they're feeling. Yeah, they haven't. If we aren't able to articulate that for them or with them, then we're just doing this dance and we're just hoping things line up. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like there's whatever that looks like in your situation. I think there's a way that you can extrapolate some of that stuff to go, what are the things that really matter to you? And I want to make sure we nail those things. Because if we can nail those things, pretty much everything else, like we can figure out, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think there's kind of two ways I think that folks can go about that, right? They can be proactive or reactive, right? On the reactive side, it can be like, what feedback does your pastor give you, right? Is he like, man, that moment kind of sucked because the crowd wasn't hot, or you know, there's a pastor friend of mine who doesn't like pads behind him when he prays. Sure. So don't turn up the pad. Right. Yeah. The worship guy can have the pad. Yeah. The senior pastor doesn't need to have it.
Yeah.
But looking for their feedback, right? And maybe there's a creative debrief session, like write down everything they say and look for a trend.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And then on the proactive side, like meet with them, like ask them good questions. That was our last podcast. There's a whole bunch of questions we gave people to unpack. Like when you have a meeting with your pastor, go ask some of these definitive questions if you don't know the answer. And that could be, again, your senior leader, could be your worship pastor, depending on who you're serving in that moment.
And I think in that, like, you have to kind of figure out how to ask the same question probably 5 different ways, and maybe in 5 different contexts or angles, not because they're trying to hold something or they're whatever. It's like, you're trying to figure out how to chisel out like a stone and marble or whatever. Like you're trying to chisel this thing out from different angles to get the shape that you're looking for. Trying to uncover what's there. Yeah. Because they're not necessarily, again, I don't think they're going to come out and like explain it in a way that really makes sense to you and you can like adapt to your context or your situation or what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So I think there's an art to that you got to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's good. I think you also talked about like defining the meeting's purpose, right? So if you have that proactive conversation with him, but if you're in a ideation session, right? Like there are a lot of pastors we know who are dreamers, right? And they're living in the ethereal, right? And so like getting that down to a form can be challenging because that's just not where they live.
Totally.
But I think defining the meeting purpose for them is really important. I think you have an interesting way of saying like, is this a how meeting or a wow meeting?
Yeah.
Right?
We've kind of used this language at Flatirons, which it might've existed before me, probably did. But we kind of at least try to define, is this a wow meeting or is this a how meeting? Is this a dreaming meeting, blue sky, like whatever? Or is this like, hey, we've kind of already done that. Now we're looking at the how. And I think that's at least helpful. It could probably get more granular than that even, but at least defining where are we at in this process? Because at some point it has to go from wow to how.
Yeah, it's true.
Otherwise there won't be anything to do.
And everybody gets frustrated.
Yeah. And so, and it's just clarity sometimes. Even actually yesterday we met, had like one of our earlier on creative meetings about Christmas. And so we're like, right at the beginning of the meeting, just clarifying this is a wow meeting. Okay. We're a little like, we all brought some ideas and some things. Yeah. But we're not in the mode of, and I get this way, you might get this way too, where hear these ideas and I'm like immediately shooting these down, or in my head I'm like, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. That's why that won't work.
You want to fly a car really where? Like,
right? Yeah. And so, but it's helpful to know like, hey, that's not the meeting we're in right now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's a time and place for that, and that's needed. It's not right now. And so I think, I think that's really helpful to define earlier on. And again, it could probably get more granular, but at least starting there.
I think that's really good. We've done a lot of work internally here around Patrick Lencioni's widget model, right?
Yep.
And Working Genius. And so, we've helped identify, there's 6 layers. Go look that up. There's a great book, great podcast. But it's great to understand who the people on your team who live in wonder, which is the very beginning of the process, and people who live in tenacity, the very end of the process. Totally. And so like, for the people who are living in wonder, like they can go dream and it doesn't have to be possible. Yeah. Right. It doesn't have to be like executable. Right. They're just dreaming. And out of that, then the other 6 layers can help to start bring form and fashion to it. That's been really important, I think, for us when we have our wow meetings, to say like, what do we want to do? And for the other folks to edit and be like, okay, hold on. Let's just get the 30,000 foot out. Totally. And then we can move to the how. Yeah. I'd be curious, what does that rhythm look like for y'all? You mentioned you have a wow meeting for Christmas. We're in late October-ish right now. Yeah. Do you guys have wow meetings every week? Do you have wow meetings once a quarter?
I would love to say that we have a very clearly defined process and just give it to you, but we don't.
Sure.
But I did want to mention real quick, the widget model has been helpful. We did this as both of our team, our worship and production team, we did a team map. Have you guys ever done that? Yeah. And it was helpful to just go, you're looking at the widget model and you see where everybody lines up in their strength their strength.
Yep.
And it was like, oh, we've got a ton of people maybe in the wonder section, and then a ton of people in the implementation, or lower on the model. We've got a big gap right here. Yeah. So it's like, doesn't necessarily give us a map on what to do, but it does inform like, hey, collectively that's our weakest area.
Yeah.
And it was helpful to look at and go, we are not short in the dreaming, ideation phase. Yep. And so that's great. Let's be aware of that. We don't need, so it's helpful to look at that, to know, especially when you bring that to like what meetings you're in, in the process where you're at. So that was super helpful for us.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And so I think when it comes to some of that how meeting, I've thought about this in a way where I think when you're in the wow phase, you're still trying to figure out how to like, I've likened this to bowling a little bit, where you're kind of like defining what the pins at the end of the lane are, and what the targets that you're going for are, whether that's outcomes, whether that's like feelings you're trying to evoke, whether that's tangibly like how many signups are we trying to get out of this announcement video, whatever. And so what's like the targets that we're trying to figure out, and then trying to put up like I think about it like the kids bumper lanes that come up in bowling, where it's like, these are the things we're going to live within to make sure we hit our targets.
Yeah.
And that bowling ball could take 2 hours to make its way down the lane.
Yeah.
But you're going to hit a target or a few of the targets because you're living within and what are these constraints? Is it time? Is it budget? Is it a certain philosophy we're not going to break? Is it, what are those things? And so that's like helpful. A way to think about it for me, at least, has been when we move from that wow to how, is really helpful to go, what are the simplifying it. What are the targets trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
What's the reality we have to live within, or the resources we want to live within?
It's probably not as clear cut, but in my head, as you're saying that, I'm wondering, like, in your wow meetings, are you talking more about outcomes, and in your hows are more of the constraints?
Yeah, that might be. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we've brought this model, and we've tried to implement it pretty much everywhere, but we talk about this in I think it's a Maxwell principle, the 10-80-10.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we talk about in a process, in an initiative, whatever it is, we look at it, you break up kind of the work that's done to get from sort of, again, ideation to implementation is, there's about 10% where you probably need your leader in there, your pastor, to like cast vision, talk about outcomes, figure out, what are we trying to do with this? What do we want to see? And it is a vision question. But again, I think it is probably one layer deeper of like, we already know what the vision is. What are we talking about for this event or this Christmas or this Easter or whatever it is? What are we trying to what do we want to see happen from it in light of the vision? How do we want that to look? And so there's this 10% where they're really involved. We're asking a lot of questions, trying to define outcomes, make it really clear. And then there's about 80% of like, all right, got all that ideas. We're going to take it to our teams. We're going to work with people. We're going to start getting quotes. We're going to blah, 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 and get 80%. And I think where I've done this, and I've seen this done a lot too, where we actually take it 90. We go, I heard all your ideas. We're going to run all the way to the finish line, and you're going to not see it till dress rehearsal 2 hours before we're doing the service or whatever, right? And they show up and they're like, that was not what I was taught. Like, how did you get that?
Yeah.
And we're like, well, doors are in 30 minutes. We can't change it now.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now we just set up our leader to fail, or 100%. Not fail, but we've set him up to, we set ourselves up to fail out, really.
Yeah.
And so anyways, instead of really going the 90, it's like, all right, 10% trying to get all the right questions asked, trying to figure out like, what's this? And again, the bowling thing, it's like, what are the targets we're trying to hit?
Yeah.
And then the 80% along the way is like doing some of the work. And part of the important part of that is like having some regular check-ins there, where it's not like weekly necessarily, doesn't have to be. I mean, it really depends on what the thing is, but it's like, hey, I just want to make sure we talked about all these ideas. We're another 10, 30%, 10, 20% into this. Here's some ideas we have. Are we close? It's like, yeah, like that, don't like that. Yep. That's what I like about that thing.
Yeah.
And you kind of go along the way to where, then you get to the last 10%. And it's like, all right, again, I'm kind of using the Christmas and Easter thing, but it's like, we're at dress rehearsal. we've still got a few days. Like we plan this in a way where it's like, we've still got a few days to tweak and change. Like you help us. Are we there? Are we not there?
Right.
Still got 10% here. We're going to put some, lipstick on this thing. Like we can still change this a little bit. Because then it gives them, your leader, your pastor, a chance to speak into it. And like, I've been in the process, but not having to do the work with you the whole way.
Right.
And it really, it sets people up to do what they're best at. So,
yeah, I think I love that. And I think where a lot of production folks or even just creative folks can get to the problem is they've gone to 100% without that last 10% check.
Yeah.
Right. Because ultimately the pastor has to land the plane, likely with that creative element in his sermon some way.
Yeah.
And so he's not resonating with it and not believing it, or it's like off in some way. It's not going to set up what we're actually here to set up, which is the gospel.
Right.
And so like having that last 10% as almost like an open-handed return, right? Like I think about it and how I build a mix, right? Like I'm going to go like define some outcomes of like, what do you want? Do you want CCM, BGVs? Do you want gospel, whatever it is. And then I'm going to do 90% of the work or 80% of the work in the mix. And I'm going to come back and say like, are we hitting it? Is this what you were thinking about? Right. And giving, whether it's a producer or whoever, the ability to say like, actually tweak this or that, but we're, a lot of times we're close.
Yeah.
But if I don't leave that openness for feedback,
right.
And we just hit send, then we have the risk of we're in the middle of show or whatever. And we've totally missed it. And it's a disconnect from what is wanted.
Yeah.
Because I think ultimately we're here to set them up for success, right? Whether that's your worship pastor or your senior pastor.
Yeah.
Because we're here to serve them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think even when it comes to the like vision, trying to implement the vision they have. And again, I think about this kind of logically and linearly, like, hey, they started this church or they came to this church. They are part of this thing because they either cast the vision or they are sold out for the vision. Vision's not changing. That hasn't changed. How we implement it might slightly change from, time to time. But that hasn't changed. When you, as the production person or whoever you are, you came in, you got hired on, or you're a part of this thing to serve them. Like they had a need. You came in and were like, yeah, I can do that. I can help support that. I want to be a part of that. So really, like, you're here to help accomplish their vision. And again, you could go down the rabbit trail of like some of the that can be taken in unhealthy ways. But I think by and large, people are like, we are here to help support the vision of our leader. And it's not the other way around. I think sometimes when we get in the like granny, it's like, hey, here's the process that I need as a production person to like make this thing work. I need you to fit into this. And sure, there are some levels of like reality and like just how things work. But by and large, I think sometimes we take that to like, hey, I need you to come fit into my vision. Again, we wouldn't say it that way, but I'm like, that's how it feels sometimes. Right. And it's like, no. Yeah. It's 2025. We can do, there is pretty much anything we can accomplish with technology, with AI, whatever it is. Like, it's only getting easier to do anything. Is that the best way to say that?
Yeah.
And so I think even when, might be on a little bit of a soapbox, but like I've, for a long time in the church world, I've heard this, like, my pastor's always asking for some crazy stuff and it's last minute and it's whatever. And it's like, okay. And they're like, I just don't know how to say no. And I'm like, well, again, it's 2025. Like, there's pretty much nothing people can't accomplish.
Right.
And you think about the, is it the resource triangle, like time, money, and people?
Yep.
And I think, I don't know if this is correct. I think what I've landed is like, it's actually just money because time and people, like, you could hire 1,000 people for the right dollar amount. Yep. You could hire 1,000 people to come in overnight, change the set, like do whatever.
Yeah.
For the right amount of money. I mean, and I think there's this, like, the answer should never be no. It should always be, yes, here's the cost. Like, you tell me what the cost is. Like, as somebody who's supporting your vision, like, I'm not going to make the call whether that costs too much or doesn't cost and whatever. Like, you help me make the call on, like, what do you think this is worth? And is that, again, is it time, money, people? Like, this is our job to help explain, like, this is what it will cost to accomplish that thing. Yeah.
I want to keep you on your soapbox for a minute. Okay.
Right.
Because I think you and I have had these conversations of like, how should you be saying no to your pastor when he has an idea?
Right.
And I think you've landed on like, it's that yes, but conversation. It's like, it's not to say, no, we can't do that. Like, you're right. It's 2025. And if they want a car flown from the ceiling, there's a way to do that. Yeah. You know, it's going to take some time, probably. It's going to take some money and hire some competent people, please. But like the no right away, I think is where we lose a lot of credibility. Yeah. Right. Instead of, I think your approach has been more like on that yes, but that's possible, but here's what it would take.
Totally. And I've had this like insecure moment sometimes of like, am I just a yes man? I'm just saying yes to everything. And I'm like, that might still be true a little bit, but I'm like, also, again, I'm really convicted, like anything is possible. And like, I'm not the one, I don't need to be the one to say, well, we can't spend that much money on that thing. Because that might be, they're like, no, I would spend double that. Yeah. And, you know, I think, and again, it's all in context, but I feel like I don't need to be the one to say no. Like, and again, there are some realities that we got to live within, but I think like, by and large, there's no reason to say no, like just flat out. There's got to be other options. Like that's probably one of the as somebody who's leading teams, that's probably one of the more frustrating things for me, where I go, if I've got a request or I've got an ask, or hey, this problem came up, we got to solve. And then if the answer comes back like, well, this is the only way to solve it, and it's only going to cost this much, or it's only going to look like this, it's like, okay, that's the only possible way. Like, there's not another option here. There's no wiggle room here to talk about this. And I'm like, that's not, I can't operate with that.
I think at the end of the day, like we as production folks, we're here to be creative, right? It's not, yes, there's spreadsheets and there's technical things and there's plumbing we have to do, if you will, but like we're here to be creative. And so, you know, I think of like, how can we creatively solve the problem for our pastors so they can go up and communicate the gospel, right? I think about the classic, pastor doesn't get his slides until, you know, Sunday at 8:15, and we're in the middle of worship. Right. And like one question I've asked people around that and push back is like, have you ever asked your pastor when he feels like God has released that message to him? Because maybe it's Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Maybe God is doing something regularly, or maybe it's Saturday night where he finally, after the chaos of the week and the funerals he preached, you know, all this stuff that he did, maybe that's when he finally has that quiet space. So your role is to help him in that, not to tell him that when he communicates with God is the wrong thing, right? Because that's between him and the Lord, right? So our role is to say like, okay, asking the question, hey, when does the message finally land for you? Then we can create the processes around it, right? So I know a church up in Minneapolis where they have a separate room dedicated for the pastor's notes. Yeah. So that literally in the middle of worship, they can go figure out the notes and then get them imported into Prayer Presenter. Right. Because again, that's just how those pastors operate. Right. So there is a way. Right. Did it take money? Yes. It took square footage. It took a producer being in there with him, but it is the way that they can enable ministry. Right.
Which is like, maybe they had this conversation, but it was like, man, can you believe our pastor wants to implement his create and get his message notes in during worship? Right. That's crazy. Yeah. And it's like, to do that, we would have to create a room. We'd have to have a producer. We'd have to there's no way we could do that. Right. And turns out
there was a way.
There's a way. And that's actually important enough to him. That he's like, let's do that. If that's a possibility, let's do that. Like, that's worth it to me. And even to like take some of the spirituality of like maybe it's just their life schedule. Like they're dropping their kids off. It's like how their week is built. Yep. Maybe, and even each week to week looks a little different. Like we just need that flexibility in there to have their slides created during worship, or, you know, somehow over Saturday night or whatever it is. Like, again, I just keep coming back to like, you're there to help serve them. Yeah. You are not there to dictate what they need to do so that you can get your thing done. Right. And so I think, I think it's really like, okay, it's an art. It's asking the right questions in the right way. And it's like, what I'm hearing you say is that you need to stay on that topic. Like, you need the flexibility to be able to create slides at this time, or in this window of time. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, let me go back and let's figure out some ideas. Here's some ways we can accomplish that. And, you know, it doesn't always have to be like least expensive option, middle of the road, and most expensive, but probably does fall out that way sometimes of like, you tell me, these are some options. Are we close? And so again, I mean, you could even apply the 10-80-10 to that, where it's like, problem is there's a thing we're trying to figure out. 10% on the front end of like, I need slides to be created kind of last minute. I need the flexibility. Great. Take a chart team 80%. Here's some different options. Are we close? And the last 10% of like, yep, that one's great. We'll figure, let's roll with that, or let's do that for 3 months, whatever. We'll revisit. So, I think the immediate no and shutting stuff down is a thing for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's a stereotype in the production ministry for a reason. Yeah. Right.
I was talking to Jake Cody about this the other day. I don't know if you remember this, there was this, I think it was a website, but it was a phone number you could text called Magic. And it was like this, it ended up being, I think it turned into like an EA, like virtual assistant kind of thing.
Okay.
But it started out like their whole tagline was, hey, if you need a helicopter to Vegas, or if you need an elephant delivered for your kid's birthday party, just text this number and we'll do the work of like, this is what it'll cost. And it might be $2 million to do, but there was like this, tell us the most crazy requests you have and we'll figure it out with whoever, like any vendor or whatever person in between. And here's what it'll cost. Yeah. And that like stuck with me of like, and that was 10 years ago. I mean, that was over 10 years ago.
Right.
So anyways, that was a side note. But
no, I love that, because I think in the healthiest way, right, that our production and creative folks can be that unlock for a pastor, right, who has ideated something. And a lot of times it's a gift to be invited into the WOW meeting, right? We don't have to be in there. They can go have that without you. So if you're in there, just, I think for some of the takeaways from today, like define, is this a WOW or a HOW meeting? Yeah. Right. Make sure like, am I being invited into something special? And if I shut it down, I might not get an invite back. So know that, define that, right? Yeah. I think the other thing you mentioned that's critical for people to take away is study your pastor. What are the 3 to 5 things that happen probably in your worship experiences that you do 51 to 52 times a year? What are those 3 to 5 things they really care about? Set them up for success in whatever that looks like. And I think the last part there is that 10-80-10 principle, right? Like, clarify the outcomes, do 80% of the work, and then leave room and space for that last 10%. Yeah. So I think those are great takeaways for our team. So thanks for joining us on the Gear Follows Vision podcast. Hope you check out some of our other content on YouTube. Check out the one just last time with Nick Kofall talking about this Gear Follows Vision concept. Thanks for joining us.